Old Mr. Chuku, the school gardener at Sunshine Girls Academy, started his day as usual. As he walked closer to the school clinic, a strange noise caught his attention. It was the sound of a baby crying. Confused, he searched until he found a small basket hidden under a bush. Inside it was a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Mr. Chuku was horrified. He had never seen something like this before. So he rushed to inform Mrs. Adeyemi, the school principal. Within hours of finding the baby, the news spread like wildfire through the academy. Students whispered and gossiped. They let their imagination run wild with theories about the baby's origin. Mrs. Adeyemi called an emergency staff meeting. Her face was tired when she addressed the teachers. We must find out the truth about this child and ensure its well-being in the meantime. The parents of the student were at the school just yesterday for visiting day, so she didn't want to have to call them back as soon as they left. Also, she didn't want questions which she didn't have answers to be thrown at her, so she called in the senior prefect, her assistant, along with the secretary. When the secretary came in, she gave her strict instructions that no pupil was allowed to use the phone. This way, they could keep things under wrap until they had some answers. She didn't need the anxious parent now. She was already exhausted, and it was only 11 a.m. in the morning. Amaka was the school's social butterfly. She was beautiful, charismatic, universally liked, and she was smart too. This was Sunshine Girls' School senior prefect. She had heard about the baby that was found. Her initial reaction was to get the students to calm their nerves and try as much as possible to reduce the gossips, ifs, and maybes among them. They listened to her because she was Amaka, the kind, beautiful, smart, always welcoming senior who wouldn't want to hear her out. But now that she was seated in her class with her own thoughts, her usual smile had disappeared to be replaced by worry. Her fingers tapped nervously on the table before her. They seemed to stop their unusual dance when the messenger from the principal came into their class and announced that the principal wanted to see the senior prefect and her assistant. Amaka turned to her left, only to realize that the assistant senior prefect, Seyi, was already looking at her. Seyi was the definition of an introvert. She didn't talk a lot, and she always kept to herself. She had a wall taller than that of China's around her. Amaka was uncomfortable with Seyi since they both started from GS1. She was not easy to read, and she would always answer her questions with either an expression or one word. Seyi was the opposite of Amaka. Seyi may have been chosen as the senior prefect because she was as smart as Amaka, but she didn't have what it took to bring the students together or to be a leader, so she was given the position of an assistant senior prefect. When they both got to the principal's office, they could feel the heaviness. The principal started by telling them that they were the first line of defense when it came to the students, and she wanted them, with the other prefects, to do their very best to kill the rumors from spreading outside the school, and she wanted the students to quiet down and focus on their studies instead of engaging in gossip. Amaka and Sheyi nodded their understanding to the principal's words. The senior prefect and the assistant, with the other prefects in the school, went round the school, the classes, the dormitories, and to the labs to make sure the students quieted down, and the students were warned not to spread rumors. If they did, they would be punished. As the days passed, even though they stopped talking loudly about it, they whispered to no end. Some students had become subject of the whispered conversation. Seyi was one of those students. They suspected her as the baby's mother because she was someone who kept to herself, but the female teachers themselves were not spared from the suspicions. After all, boarding school life was boring, and finally, they had something interesting to talk about. The school's nurse, Mrs. Okoro, who was in charge of the baby's care, was also a subject of gossip. After all, it was strange the way she looked after the child, because only its mother would care about the baby that much. And the baby was found close to the clinic. This, of course, didn't stop the student from turning the makeshift nursery into a viewing box. They constantly found excuses to pass by, hoping for a glimpse of the mysterious infant. The school prefect had all come by in groups, and some came alone to make sure the students weren't disturbing the baby. Seyi had come by once she had a free period. She went as far as to hold the baby, who squirmed in her arms. She felt an unexpected sense of protectiveness when she looked at the innocent life in her hands. As the days continued, the students began to notice that the male teachers in the school had stopped being friendly and accessible. This was bound to happen. After all, if a student was the mother of the baby, it was only logical that the father would be a male teacher. After all, this was a girls only boarding school. Mr. Okonkwo was the beloved literature teacher, known for bringing books to life in his classes. But after the baby was found, Mr. Okonkwo was cold in his teachings. He looked tired and worried. Sheyi noticed these things but said nothing. After all the male teachers were behaving differently. But what struck her as hard was the fact that she saw him last week talking to Amaka in a hushed whisper. She could tell that he was annoyed because he was a cheerful person, but that was none of her business, so she closed her mind to it. When no student had come forward with a confession in a week, one morning on the assembly, Mrs. Adeyemi addressed the students and told them that their class teachers with other teachers would be conducting an interview session. We must find out the truth, she said. The girls looked scared. They may not be the mother of the baby, but sitting in a closed room with a couple of teachers was nerve-wracking. Suddenly, the gossip about the baby was no longer interesting, it was scary. When the principal made a morning announcement, Sheyi turned to her right to see Amaka's cheerful and welcoming face turn pale. Sheyi wondered if they would really find the baby's mother with these methods. Everyone had told the horrifying tale of how their interview went. Some were definitely exaggerated just to make the story more juicy, and others were exaggerated due to the fear they experienced. When it was Shei's turn, the principal was amongst the interviewer as she had been when a prefect was interviewed, and so she asked, "Where were you the night the baby was found? Did you see anything unusual?" Shei told her truth. She had been in her room studying, and she hadn't seen anything strange but a shadow. But she was going to keep that part to herself. After all, it could just be students sneaking around, which they did quite often on the day of visiting day, to share with their friends what their parents brought for them. Mrs. Adeyemi looked at her closely, then nodded. "Thank you, Sheyi. You may go." The interviews continued throughout the week, and with it, a new rumor emerged when Nneka, a quiet girl from SS2, was seen crying near the infirmary. "Maybe it's her baby," the student whispered. They said she had missed school for a while last year, which was what fanned the rumor. She felt sympathy for Nneka because of the suspicious glances and hushed conversations about her. She decided to talk to Nneka after she saw her crying one evening. "Are you okay?" she asked. Nneka looked surprised that someone was being nice to her. "Everyone thinks the baby is mine," Nneka said, "but it's not. I just feel sorry for it because I was also abandoned by my birth parent. That is why I visit the clinic." Sheyi believed her, but if the baby wasn't Nneka's, whose was it? Another thing she had noticed was the changes with Amaka. She still smiled and laughed with her friends, but Seyi noticed she looked tired. And once more, she noticed Amaka and Mr. Okonkwo talking at the back of the science lab, but they were arguing more than talking. They stopped talking when they saw Seyi. She caught a glimpse of Amaka's face, and it looked like she had been crying. Seyi was disturbed about the baby, the student, the rumors, Amaka, and Mr. Okonkwo. Everything that was happening was too much for her. She had always lived her life in the shadows of silence, so she laid awake on her bed. She decided to take a short walk within a dormitory. The gates to the dormitory were closed anyways, so there was nowhere she could go. As she passed the house matron's room, she heard voices. They were talking about the baby. Then she heard them mention her name. Before she could hear more of their discussion, a hand on her shoulder made her jump. It was Amaka, her face a mask of determination. "We need to talk," she whispered. But before any talks could happen, they heard movement from the house matron's room. So each of them walked quickly to their beds and got whatever sleep they could. Once they had gotten to their class, Amaka signaled to Seyi to meet her outside. They walked in stunned silence until they got to a secluded place. Amaka's composure crumbled. "The baby, it's not mine," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But I know whose it is." Before she could give her more information, the sound of approaching footsteps sent both girls fleeing back to their class, leaving Shei's mind reeling with unanswered questions. Shei tried approaching Amaka throughout the day, but she skillfully avoided her at every turn. After classes, Shei spotted Amaka in another hushed conversation with Mr. Okonkwo. She strained to hear, but only caught fragments of the exchange. "We can't keep this secret much longer," Mr. Okonkwo insisted. "It is not fair to the baby." Amaka erupted into tears. "But what will happen to her?" she said in a sad voice. She didn't hear any more of that conversation because Amaka was a crying mess. It would seem Sunshine Girls Academy couldn't catch a break because there was another uproar, and the reason for the uproar was the note that appeared on the school's notice board. It said, "I am sorry, I didn't know what to do. Please forgive me." Everyone was talking about it. Sheyi noticed that Amaka looked pale when she saw the note. The news had somehow leaked outside. Nobody knew how or when, but they had reporters calling the school's authority and asking questions about the baby. Mrs. Adeyemi called an emergency assembly. When they were all assembled in the hall, she said into a microphone, "Our school's good name is at risk. If anyone knows anything about this baby, you must come forward. It is the right thing to do." Sheyi saw Amaka sink lower in her seat. After the assembly, Sheyi found Amaka crying in the bathroom. "I can't take it anymore. I want to tell the truth, but I am scared." Sheyi put her arms around Amaka and said, "Whatever it is, I will help you." Amaka looked at Sheyi and said, "Okay, the baby belongs to my sister," she said. Sheyi was shocked. Amaka explained that her sister had gotten pregnant while they were on holiday. She had hidden it from the parents because she was scared to tell them, and they hadn't noticed because she was a fat child, so they thought she just gained some more holiday weight. She had given birth to the baby on the night of visiting day, which was when Amaka herself found out. She thought that Amaka could help her find a way to take care of it since she was much older. She had gone to Mr. Okonkwo that night since he was a teacher on duty for prep, and by the time she came back, her younger sister had run away with the child out of fear of Amaka calling a teacher and her getting expelled in the long run. Mr. Okonkwo had kept this secret to protect Amaka and her sister, but the situation was getting out of control. Sheyi and Amaka talked for hours. When Sheyi finally said, "We have to tell Mrs. Adeyemi the truth," Amaka looked scared, but she nodded. She knew Seyi was right. It was time to let the cat out of the bag. She looked at Seyi and said, "Will you come with me?" She nodded yes. The next morning, Seyi and Amaka set out for Mrs. Adeyemi's office. Mr. Okonkwo was there too. Mrs. Adeyemi was shocked to see these three people in her office at the same time. As Amaka started to speak, the door opened in surprise. A young girl of 16 years old rushed in. It was Amaka's sister. "I'm sorry," she cried. "The baby is mine. I will explain everything." Amaka's sister, Adana, told her story to Mrs. Adeyemi while crying her eyes out. Mrs. Adeyemi listened quietly, her face serious. After hearing everything, the principal spoke. "This is a very serious matter, but I am glad the truth is finally out. But now we must focus on what's best for the baby." She and everyone present agreed. Mrs. Okoro brought the baby to the office. When Adana saw her child, she held her close to herself and cried with joy. "I am so sorry, little one. I will never leave you again." Everyone, including Mrs. Adeyemi, had tears in their eyes at this touching scene. Mrs. Adeyemi finally had all the answers to the unasked and asked questions. She called another meeting with all the students. She explained what had happened, but she didn't mention anyone's names. She had decided to protect the student and the teacher involved, but they would still be punished in one way or another. Many of the parents had heard what was happening, and now that Mrs. Adeyemi had answers, she drafted a letter to all parents and even talked to some of them over the phone. She had told them everything from the discovery of the baby to the mother finally coming forward, but she still didn't name names. Some parents were angry and some were understanding. There was another change she implemented, and that was she added a new program to the school's curriculum. It was sex education and family planning. Mr. Okonkwo, Amaka, and Adana were all given a strict talking to by Mrs. Adeyemi. She didn't want to ruin Mr. Okonkwo's reputation, or Amaka's, or Adana's. After all, they were good people and she wanted to protect them. She didn't want to ruin Mr. Okonkwo's reputation. After all, he was good at his job and he tried to protect his students, although he should have come to her the moment he found out. When Adana and Amaka's parents got a call from Mrs. Adeyemi, they rushed to the school. At first, they were angry because what parents wouldn't be, but they agreed to help with the baby. Mrs. Adeyemi excused Adana for the remaining term with the excuse of family issue. Adana's parents wanted their daughter to finish secondary school. After all, she had a year and a couple of months left. Mrs. Adeyemi was glad that they hadn't stopped her education. It would do her no good in the future. As the school term ended, things slowly got back to normal, yet everything felt different. Before leaving for the holiday, a letter was brought to Seyi by Amaka. It was from Adana. She said, "Thank you for being there for Amaka and thank you for helping me do the right thing. My baby and I are doing well. You must come and visit me," Amaka told Seyi once she finished reading the letter. "You can meet my niece properly. And you can ask Nneka if she also wants to come." Sheyi had told Amaka about Nneka. This way, Nneka would be happy that the baby was well cared for. Sheyi said, "Yes, I would love to." When the new school term started, everything was different. The girls were wiser, and the school's health program was a success. The girls felt more comfortable asking questions and getting help. "I wish we had this before," one student said. "It might have prevented a lot of problems." News about how Sunshine Girls Academy handled the situation spread. Other schools started to copy their health programs. "We turned a difficult situation into a chance to grow," Mrs. Adeyemi told a reporter. The end. Let me know what you guys think about the story and about Seyi, Amaka, Mr. Okonkwo, Adana, Nneka, and Mrs. Adeyemi. Would you yourself have handled the situation any different? Let me know. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment down below.